Yo, what's going on? It's Loza. We're getting into the best pure Dark Magician list, and this list is all about floodgates. So you'll notice right now there's a lot of purple cards. We're focusing on Goes and Match, Rivalry of the Warlords, Skill Drain, and Judgment. Now, Judgment is here because you'll see how spell trap heavy this deck list is. If we get Lightning Storm, if we get dusted, the game is over, more or less. So we do want to turbo Dark Magician the Dragon Knight in this build. Now, it's a bit quirky because Dragon Knight actually conflicts with Rivalry, but that's just how it is. We can still play under Rivalry, and don't forget that Magician Souls can send spells and traps to draw. Yes, even your active Skill Drain. Under Skill Drain, Magician Souls can still send the Skill Drain and get draws, and you can reset the floodgates. So on your turn, you don't have to play around all these floodgates, but then on your opponent's turn, you hopefully draw into more with Magician Souls, and you can just flip them up once again. So let's look at this scenario where you've top decked your Magician's Rod, fantastic, but your Skill Drain's actually already up. Rutroll. Well, if you've got Magician Souls on the field or in your hand, go ahead and activate it, milling one of the DM cards. Then you're going to be able to use Magician Souls effect, and you can actually send 1 to 2 of those floodgates. And look, it works. Because it sends for cost, and then the Skill Drain's no longer on the field, you're actually able to draw. From here, fantastic. I'm able to play out my normal Dark Magician, Magician's Rod effect, and you'll see from the draws, I'm able to actually start comboing off. So that's insane. So that is one of the reasons why I think Floodgates and Dark Magician work so well. Another reason is Dark Magician's game plan is to set up the DM triangle, which is essentially Circle, Eternal Soul, and a Dark Magician in rotation. And you'll notice that process takes 3 cards to achieve 1 banish and is quite irrelevant by today's standard of negations and whatnot. So what we need to do with this deck is slow the opponent down to the pace of our deck to 2005 Dark Magician, right? So we've got cards to help us. Along with our floodgates, we've also got a field spell floodgate, the Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Now, this isn't good in every matchup, so what you'd actually do is you'd play more copies of it, but you'd put them into that side deck. Fantastic. We'll get into these cards a bit later as well. Now, with Terraforming, you're able to go and grab Salvation. Salvation is your additional copy of Eternal Soul, but it provides you benefits such as being able to be sent for the Tamaya Summon effect, or sent by your Magician Souls for some extra draws. So Salvation actually does come up for mainly those 2 reasons. It does have another effect that barely ever comes up. Now, Salvation has an additional effect, but it's worded quite weirdly, so let me just summarize it. Whenever you summon DM, you can summon DMG if she's in your grave, and whenever you summon DMG, if you have DM in your grave, you can summon him. But it's only once per turn, and you do have to target the monster. So, for example, I summon DM, I have to target him, and then on resolution, it will summon DMG. If that target moves, you lose it. So if you use Salvation effect, Chainlink 1, and you Chainlink 2 Rod to tribute the spellcaster you're targeting with Salvation, you lose the Rod, you get the Rod add back, but you lose the Salvation effect to summon. So it's a bit quirky with the deck. You normally want to use your Salvation effect, which will summon out a DM or DMG on your field, and then on a new chain, you're able to trigger your Rod once again because Salvation is an effect of a spell trap, which means you've met the conditions for Rod's trigger effect once again. All right, let's have a look at this scenario I've set up here. Now, we've got Rod in the grave, and we are hoping to get it back, but we do also want to trigger the Salvation here and the Eternal Soul. So we're going to see what we have to do to get all these effects to roll properly. The opponent here is going to normal summon their Rod. Not really that important, but what we're trying to do here is establish our chain linking sequence. So we're going to activate our Eternal Soul here. This will let us summon DM. If we had Circle up, great, we'd get a banish. Unfortunately, we don't have Circle, so it's a bit grim. But now we've met the trigger effect of 2 cards. You'll see Salvation is glowing and my graveyard is glowing, so I can actually trigger both effects and I get to pick the sequencing here. Now, what you actually want to do is go Magician Salvation effect, and you're going to target that Dark Magician for this effect. Now, I didn't chain the Rod effect, because if I did chain the Rod there and I tributed the DM, which is normally what you tribute, I would lose the target. So instead, I'm able to trigger Rod on a new chain, tributing that DM, and then I'm able to get Rod back to the hand. And the reason why we like to tribute DM for this combo is because we can bring back DM every turn with Eternal Soul, so it's kind of like that resource we can just chuck away all the time. Obviously, you contribute your Artemis, and that's a reason why we play Artemis. She's only got 800 attacks, so your opponent's probably going to hit her. So she's probably the better target for you to tribute for Rod here. That brings me on to the next topic of some of our links, and Artemis is in this deck list for that very reason. People who are unsure of that, in a build like this, Artemis actually thrives, and I'll show you why. Now, I've had so many games where my opening hand looks something similar to this. one Dark Magician card being Rod and all back row that is just irrelevant, it might keep me in the game, but it's not progressing my game state. Now, Rod does have to come down here and not get hand trapped. If you get hand trapped on this Rod, obviously you're having a terrible time. Rod has to survive through that hand trap there, and then you're able to set all these cards. But before we do that, we're just going to link away the Artemis. Fantastic. Artemis will actually prove why she's so useful on the opponent's turn. So let's get to that, but you're going to want to set all these cards because otherwise we're probably losing the game. Now on the opponent's turn, we have a plethora of cards to activate. We've got Skill Drain, Rivalry, Judgment, and Gozen. Well, in this case, we've got one of everything, which is perfect. But let's say the opponent doesn't do anything that threatens any of these cards, but we do want to add that Rod back. Well, obviously flipping one of these would be the way to do that. And at the very end phase of the turn, I'll show you what you're going to do. So if they do something that threatens Artemis, if they go to the battle phase and they try to hit over Artemis, go ahead and flip up your Soul Servant. Now, you could flip up any of these other cards too, but they may impact your next turn, or they might impact your opponent in a negative way. They may impact your opponent in a positive way, which you don't want. You want to impact the opponent in a negative way, so you'll be flipping these when they try to get their effects off and whatnot. But in this case, nothing's happened. But anyway, you'd be using these when you would need to. And then you'd flip up the Soul Servant at the very end of your turn. And this would normally stack Magician Souls, but we do now have Illusion of Chaos. So we're going to stack that instead, and you're going to find out why very soon. Now we're going to be able to trigger the Rod effect in the grave. And we're going to be able to get rid of that Artemis. So if you look to our hand right now, we've got Rod, and it's now our turn, because that was the end phase of the opponent's turn. We've got Rod, and we've got Illusion of Chaos, plus all of our back row. We're able to play the game now. For anyone who knows, Rod and Illusion of Chaos makes any fusion in the deck, or any of the good fusions in the deck, I should say. So from here, we're going to make Illusion of Chaos, spin the wheel. We're going to go and grab Magician Souls, and we're going to put, sadly, we've got to put the Illusion of Chaos back on top of the deck, but, you know, that's just how it is. Now, to play around Bestials, we're going to start with the Magician Souls, summoning out the DM. So we're going to put the DM in the grave, we're going to summon out the DM. Fantastic. Now, if you did want to get a Circle Banish, you would want to do this Rod effect first, and you'd normal this Rod, and this Rod would go and get you that Circle, and that would get you that Banish, right? But in this case, we're going to make a fusion play, so we're just going to go grab Soul Servant. We don't really care about too much else. Yeah, we've got one in the grave, but the reason why we need to grab a Soul Servant here is because we need to stack this exact card, and that exact card is going to be none other than Timaeus. Now, this is the searchable Timaeus. Unfortunately, it's not quite as good as it should be. Eye of Timaeus was obviously unsearchable, but quite a decent card, if I do say so. If it was searchable, it would be quite good. This card was meant to be a searchable version of Eye of Timaeus, and to me, it hit the mark. Let me know in the comments what you think of this card. I think this card just kind of flopped. But you can see here, now we can go to our Dragon Knight, protect our back row. Bada bing, bada boom. You now have a game where you have all this back row and Dragon Knight to kind of win the game for you. So of course, Rod and Souls in this deck can get us to any of these fusions that we really want to make, which is super nice. Some of these fusions, such as the Dark Magicians or Dark Magician the Dragon Knight or even Dragoon, partnered up with these Floodgate cards will just win you games. Now, if you do get hand trapped on the Rod and the Magician Souls and all the effects you do to try to get to these fusions, that's okay. You're going to set these back row, maybe set a village, or play a village rather, and look, maybe you'll be okay. If you do hit the Circle, Eternal Soul, Dark Magician Triangle, fantastic. If you don't, bad luck. Set your back row and pray. But this kind of build feels like a very traditional, old school version of DM, where you're just really relying on that back row to help you. And cards like the Dark Magicians in this build are sensational, because if Dark Magicians flips up a rivalry or something and you're able to set it and use it that turn, oh, you are popping off. I think that's about all we need to talk about in the main deck. One last thing though, Upstart. Don't forget that your good old Upstart can be chained with your Soul Servant to go and get anything in the deck. So you can go Upstart, wait for the opponent's response. They normally won't ash it unless they're very silly. Chain the Soul Servant. You're able to get Illusion of Chaos from there, or Timaeus, Rod, Souls, literally you name it. You can go get Circle, Eternal Soul too. But normally you're going to grab your monsters with this combo and just start comboing off. It allows you to do Dark Magician stuff, and that's what we like. So Upstart, super cool card in this build. You can always play an additional prep. You'll notice I'm at now 3 prep to Illusion of Chaos. That's probably how I'd finish this build, though you'd probably want to play hand traps. But I feel like with this many floodgates, we just forget about hand traps and we just go all floodgate and judgment mode on them. Now, maybe in the side, you'd want to sub out for Ash Imperm and maybe a bunch of other meta-relevant hand traps, whether Nibiru is relevant in the format, whether Ghost Ogre is relevant in the format. That might be what you'd have in the side to sub these out for when you know you're going second, because unfortunately, a build like this needs to win the die roll. You do need to go first with a build like this. In terms of the extra deck, it's obviously not finished, but this leaves you room for super poly targets if that's another side card you'd like to consider. Plus, this is all you really need for DM. I've actually gone overboard. Like, you can definitely play without BLS, without the Anima, but I would say pretty much I'm going to rip some cards from here. I would say this is the standard DM extra deck. The reason being Dragon Knight's so good. You could maybe even say 1 Dragoon, but I really like Dragoon, so I play 2. You could cut it down to 1 though. Muster of Chaos at 1 because it's able to wipe fields and also OTK sometimes with the combo we've looked at earlier. Dragoon is just super, super good. There's not much more to say about it. Dragon Knight's great in a build like this with all this good back row to protect. Being able to protect Secret Village as well is insane. I know it's not a spellcaster itself, but, you know, every other fusion you make and every other DM card is. So if you just have Dragon Knight and Rod on the field with Village, like, oh, you're having a good time. The Dark Magicians in a build like this also thrives because there's a lot of good hits off its effect, whereas normally we don't have too many hits that are good. Access Code is played because Dark the Dark Charmer lets you climb into Selene, and Selene lets you climb an Access Code. Absolutely amazing turn 2 play. Obviously, this play gets turned off by Gozen and by Rivalry and by Skill Drain. So all your floodgates turn this play off, but it's good to have it there as a backup for if your opponent outs all this stuff. Or maybe you can out it yourself with the combo we showed earlier. Magician Souls can send these floodgates and get you draws. It's insane, and it lets you just play again on your turn if you really want to pop off. Artemis, we've been over so many times now on the channel. It lets you recycle Rod. It's beautiful. It just does the job. If it had an effect, great, but maybe the DM link down the line will have an effect, and, you know, we won't have to play this anymore. I'm Duck. You can also play Link Spider, but this is mainly just for getting DM off the field, so you can trigger that Eternal Soul again and get that circle out, trigger your circle, right? So all you really want to do with cards like Link Spider and I'm Duck is loop your DM. Now, obviously, you can use other links and higher links to do that, but typically, if you just have DM, Circle, Eternal Soul, this is all you need, right? You just need a Link one to get DM off the field, so here it is. Now, additionally, I do like playing BLS against Eldritch as well as the other trap deck with the woman, I forget, it's just Lady Eldritch though. The name escapes me right now, but you guys know the deck I'm talking about. Labyrinth, that's the one. This beats you, this helps win the Labyrinth and Eldritch matchup, and some other weird, like, rogue matchups too. This card, when it destroys a monster by battle, you can pick the effect to banish a card on the field or gain 1500. You're never picking that other effect. It's terrible. You get a second attack next battle phase. Like, you don't want that. You want value now. Going to 1500 with a Link 3, that also, by the way, if you link summon this with a 7 or higher, which is DM or, like, you know, Dragon Knight, any of your guys that you can recycle, you're going to use to link summon this guy. And if he's summoned with a level 7 or higher, your opponent can't target this with card effects, also can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects. So this card's actually kind of nuts. And if you buff it to 1450, like 4500, what are they going to do, right? That's Blue Eye's ultimate level stats on a card that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. So actually very, very useful. What I find is a struggle, though, is sometimes getting this out. But, you know, I think it's a decent card to have. Sometimes it's a bit of a win more card, which is the reason why I say, you know what, you don't have to play it. But I do find it's nice in a couple of niche matchups. And it's very Yugi being a BLS card, right? I love that. I love that about it. A Relinquish Anima, a Pegasus card now. Now, Relinquish Anima makes your Magician Souls when you're playing second just have an extra interruption, right? You can use Magician Souls, send your spells and traps and get some draws. Obviously, so if you've got too many preps, great. If you've got too many Soul Summons, great. Send them away for draws, that's absolutely fine. Salvation, another good card to send for a draw, after it's set Eternal Soul, of course. If you happen to open Salvation and an Eternal Soul, you can Salvation, force it to set Eternal Soul, send the forced set Eternal Soul and the Salvation to the grave, and then your opponent won't know where you set your other Eternal Soul, your real Eternal Soul, right? So that can be a nice little combo too. But basically, Anima is just a way to make Magician Souls more aggressive playing second. Now, obviously, if you have Rod and Souls going second, you can go Circle and use Souls to summon DM, and that gets you a Banish. But this feels safer. Going Magician Souls first, summoning the Souls, and going into Anima if your opponents misplace their monsters, and being able to bait a negate, or just absorb one of their monsters if they don't have a negate, it's kind of crazy. Like, this baits Imperm and Veilers and stuff a lot of the time, and that's really good, right? And then that means you can go ahead and normal Rod and actually get the effect off. So I quite like Anima for that reason. It just helps playing second, which we do struggle to do, especially in a build that relies this heavily on floodgates. That's pretty much it for the extra deck. I'm going to talk about some additional cards you could play. I don't really recommend any of these too heavily because they're all very, very situational. Kind of like more situational than the BLS scenario. So one is Wewitch. Sometimes you just need to get your monsters off the field, and because we're playing so many floodgates like Rivalry and Gozen, this is just a dark spellcaster Link 2. Yes, it buffs them by 500, but it's not that relevant, and a lot of decks are dark, so often it's not really helping you too much. When it is destroyed by battle or card effect, add a dark from grave to hand. Not too relevant, but it's an effect that it has. I find myself hating this card and never wanting to play it, but I know people like it. So here it is. If you like this card, great, here it is in the video, but I would say you can do without it. Here's another one, which is in a similar scenario. I like Beat Cop, but it's only good if you're ahead. And the reason is, if you're ahead, Beat Cop, if it's linked someone with 2 dark monsters with different names, so Rotten Souls, you can tribute the Beat Cop and put a patrol counter on one of your cards, and then when that card would be destroyed, you just remove the patrol counter instead. So for example, you can put the patrol counter on Circle, you can put the patrol counter on Eternal Soul, and that means it's kind of protected. But once again, it's only protected from destruction, so that doesn't do anything for like Nightmare Unicorn Spin, Cosmic Cyclone Banish. Like, you're not playing around everything, just a couple of things. And by the time you have Circle Eternal Soul, like Eternal Soul has to be face up for you to use Beat Cop on it, right? So you've already gone past a turn of your opponent playing. So you already know the outcome of the game by then, more or less, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And like, if you're going to Beat Cop just to protect your Eternal Soul, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, the game is probably already in your favor by that point, is what I'm trying to say. Now, when Mystic Mine was legal and you played that in DM, that was a turn 1 play. We would link Rotten Souls into Beat Cop turn 1 and, you know, put the patrol counter on Mystic Mine, try to pass turn, Mystic Mine tries to pop itself, and you protect it. Brilliant play. But obviously, that play is gone now because Mystic Mine is banned. So Beat Cop, less relevant, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Daybreak of the Shining Magical Warrior. I really feel like they missed the mark on this. Link 2 didn't want to make it too broken, and they just made it really bad instead. So it plays much like the regular breaker from the OG Yu-Gi-Oh! It gets spell counter, and when it has a spell counter, it goes to 1900, and you can remove that counter to target a card on the field and destroy it. However, this time, it's any card, but in exchange for that, it's 2 spell counters, and it starts with 1. So how do you get the second spell counter? Well, you have to special a spellcaster to a zone this card points to, which is pretty hard in DM if you've just summoned Rotten Souls. You don't typically have too many more special summons for spellcasters. You could have Apprentice, and that requires a discard. It's not great at all. I just don't really like it. But in a build like this with this many floodgates, you could probably pull it off. But once again, if you've got Gozen up, you can't go into it. If you've got Rivalry, you're okay. If you've got Skill Drain, there's no point. So once again, it's a thing you can play if you want. Ashik Magician, this is probably one of the better ones here because it literally says, when it's linked someone return all the monsters this card points to the hand. Now that can be very good. For one, it doesn't target, it just says return cards this card points to, kind of like Anima, pointing to something good. So if your opponent misplaces stuff, that's pretty good for you. Once per turn, you can declare a card name and excavate the top card of your deck equal to the total link rating of link monsters co-linked to this. And then if any excavated copies of the declared card are there, you can actually add them to your hand and send the remaining to the grave. The unfortunate part of this is it says co-linked, and we stack in our deck. This was nearly a really good link too for us, but we stack in our deck, and this card just doesn't hit the mark because how often are we going to co-link this card? Like, realistically, the best way we co-link this is we open Apprentice, Rotten Souls, and Soul summons out like Relinquish Anima or Link Karibo pointing to it. You know what I mean? Like, that's all I can think of. So, you know what? It's probably not going to happen. But I thought it's a nifty card to include because it is a form of removal going second, and it's just 2 monsters with the same type, except tokens. And you'll notice all of our monsters are spellcasters more or less, outside of Tomais. So that's pretty cool. One side card that I really do enjoy is Dark Magic Attack. It's very situational, and it's kind of a worse duster a lot of the time unless you have DM out. But I thought I'd include it because I think this is a standard card for siding. And look, if you are going to an actual tournament with time rules, here's a little spicy tech. So Magic Formula lets you win in time by just sending it to the grave. Now, it does say equip to a DM or a DMG, gain 700, but the main thing we care about is if this card is sent, it's if not when, which is important. If this card's sent from field to grave, gain 1000 LP. So you set this card on the field, you summon Magician Souls sends it for a draw, the opponent can respond with Ash or whatever, Imperm, Vela, doesn't matter. Now we get on a new chain, gain 1000 LP. And if it's in time, you win the game. I love it. And it's searchable off Rod. So your typical Rod Souls combo, your Rod will go grab you the magic formula, and your Souls will then be sending it to draw. Now, of course, you could just summon DM off the Souls and equip it, and then link it away for I'm Duck, and that works too, because it hits the grave, you gain 1,000. So that's another way you could do that as well. The other way is you just set it and hope your opponent plays a board wipe, because you're playing DM, and they should be playing board wipes if they know they're versing Dark Magician, and it's this floodgatey. I would say put a copy of Magic Formula in your deck, because you're going to need it at your locals. Anyway, that's probably the end of this pure Dark Magician profile. I tried to not focus on Dragoon too heavily, because I know some people don't like that, but I do believe Dragoon is the way to play this deck. But this deck, with Floodgates and any of these boss monsters, you're honestly going to have a really good time, especially if you get the Village up. Village is a phenomenal card that shuts off 90% of decks, because spells make up so many decks right now. Now, of course, if you're versing Labyrinth, well, Village might not help you too much, but in that case, hopefully the rest of your back row will be very beneficial, and your little BLS man chilling down here as well. Anyway, that's all for this deck profile. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've got so many other DM videos, so if you're into DM content, stick around and watch some of that other stuff, and I'll catch you very soon. Peace. Hey you, yeah you, you've been wondering where I get my singles from. Well, it brings me great joy to say I get my singles from Grimdark Gaming. Whether you play Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, Dragon Ball, Flesh and Blood, Magic the Gathering, MetaZoo, or whatever it is you're after, make sure with your purchase to use code LOZA2 and apply that to get 5% off your order. And of course, that 5% goes to helping me out to make this channel so awesome for you. So make sure you check out Grimdark Gaming down in the description of this video and use the promo code LOZA2.